Hey guys, and welcome back to another Secret Entourage episode. Today we have with me Chris Yorke, the CEO and founder of Carbon Auto Group. So we've had previously individuals who were doing exotic car rentals, but Chris has a unique story. And from what I understand, you got fired for driving a Ferrari. Is that right?
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, tell me about it because I got kind of canned for the same reason in banking. So I'm excited to meet someone else who's not or who enjoyed being pushed out because they weren't following the status quo. So tell me all about that story first.
Right. I spend a lot of my time, at least secularly, working in oil and gas, IT. So just software stuff, and yeah, we had a. I guess when people find out what kind of car you drive, they automatically start to make assumptions about you,
Mm-hmm.
or they, especially if you're working in an environment where your manager might have a certain kind of ego issue that
Mm-hmm.
comes into play when they find out someone that works for them is maybe doing something more than they're doing. So it kind of throws, I guess, their little equilibrium off of what a employee or supervisor should feel their employees have are capable of. So yeah, I remember I was taking a vacation. So I was taking a trip to Argentina, and I put in like a 2 week, I think, vacation to do that. The manager, I think, that I had prior to that ended up getting fired, so I had a new manager that came in. And the rumor he heard about me was that I had this exotic car thing I was doing, and then he wanted to deny that vacation I was going to take. And so he knew I was an entrepreneur, and so that was already an issue many times when we worked for another company.
Mm-hmm.
So pretty much, long story short, what he had said was, "Hey, I'm going to either deny your vacation request or I'm going to not pay you for a week." And so I said, "Okay, well, just I'm not worried about getting paid for that week." And so his response was, "Well, I'm sure you're not worried being the guy that's driving a Ferrari to work." And so I said, I don't know. I can't answer that. So when I came back from vacation, he immediately fired me.
So,
So,
like, how does that feel, right? Because I've been through that, so I understand kind of the logic. But tell me a little bit about your journey to starting your business. Like, why did you start an exotic car rental company while working in oil and gas? Because most people make good money in oil and gas.
right, right. I mean, for me, it wasn't. I guess my entrepreneurial background is something that didn't just happen overnight. And it's not about money even. Ever since I was little, I've always just been pulled towards entrepreneurship. And so no matter how much money I make working with someone or for someone, it's not even about that money. It just feels correct whenever you're doing something that you actually have a real passion to
Mm-hmm.
do and you're willing to sacrifice for. And so I ended up getting into the exotic car game. Prior, I started a couple different businesses. Some did okay, some failed. But I was always passionate, as many guys are, about cars. And so I started to research what would be a good business to get into. I remember reading an article in the Business Journal, and it talked about how this is back in 2011, I believe, and it said that car renting was the future of car ownership. And so it was talking about in the future there being a trend of person to person car renting. So that's within the next year you start to see sites pop up like Relay Rides, now Turo. And so I tested the market out by putting out two cars that I personally had in that space and just seeing how many reservations people were making, just to kind of test the waters. I had a Lexus IS 350 at the time that was renting out, and I started to see, man, there's a real trend here of people wanting cars coming into town. And so I said maybe this could be a good transition to see how exotics could work for me, because without renting them, exotics are a bad investment, for me. So I was like, how can we kind of offset that note for the
Mm-hmm.
vehicle and still be able to justify having a garage with 12 exotic vehicles in it? So
So, early on, you started kind of renting out this IS, or you were saying a Lexus, early on for people. Can you share a little bit about, tell me about that experience starting? What was the first person that rented your car like? And how did you have that peace of mind knowing they wouldn't crash it or that your insurance would cover it even though you're renting it?
right. Well, at that time, going through another company, they provided the insurance guarantees once you registered your vehicle with them, so you had that cushion. Um, And the first person that I actually rented to, he was a guy that was coming into town, which is generally our really the majority of clients that you get renting. He was a golfer. I forget his name. He was playing in a tournament here in Houston, and so he needed a car for 2 weeks, which was lucrative for me. And so that kind of just gave me the kind of, I guess, confidence I needed to see repeatedly. I kept getting guys requesting my vehicles, and I said, wow, this really could be a lucrative business to get into. But for me, I didn't want to, I'm not too passionate about just your budget car type scenario. So about a year from there, it just was a lot of intense research into seeing, okay, how do we attract people that really don't want just your nice kind of budget car, but are willing to spend upwards of $2,000 a day to take your vehicle.
Interesting. So when you transition from normal cars to exotics, I mean, the insurance on those other third-party sites won't cover exotics. Tell me a little bit about how that works out for you now.
So what we do now is we use our clients' insurance policy. So as long as they have full coverage insurance that covers at least $300,000 in property damage, then they can rent with us. In most cases, though, your average renter has about 50 to 100,000 in property damage, so they have to actually call and increase their coverage. But as long as they do that, and we have so their appropriate driver's licenses and that kind of stuff, then it's not an issue.
I understand. So you're saying you're ultimately piggybacking off of their insurance like a lot of places do, but what happens, I mean, it becomes almost like a nightmare if something goes wrong, doesn't it? Because I have a lot of friends in this business too. Like, I mean, I'm sure people too, between Miami to LA, like that have massive rental companies, with like 40, 50 cars at a time. But they're always using massive insurance coverage on top of, the actual person, obviously, that they go after if something goes wrong.
Right. So personally, I have, of course, all the cars covered out under myself, under my umbrella. But anytime that we have the renters rent from us, we would just strictly, we don't offer an insurance. We don't sell an insurance to them. In the past, it was an okay idea to go ahead and sell whoever comes in an insurance, but the prices these days to do that, it doesn't make sense to do it that way. So you have to really also do a lot of your due diligence before you hand the keys to someone. So honestly, we turn down almost as much phone calls as we get just because of that one issue.
So when you get in this business today, you said something interesting earlier. You said, back then I read an article that like kind of car sharing and car renting was kind of the future of car ownership. That's a very different way to look at cars. I mean, from a exotic to a normal standpoint, like a normal car and an exotic car. Those are two completely different usage type of cars. Mm-hmm. Tell me a little bit about looking at that then, like kind of reading an article that kind of sparked that idea in you to kind of do this versus where you are today. Was this what you expected the industry to be, or has it kind of shifted now to becoming a whole different business all by itself?
Well, I didn't anticipate, I wasn't looking at it necessarily in being the exact same kind of business as what I read about, because this is a completely different branch off from that, as opposed to someone that needs something just as a necessity versus someone that really is using this for the most part as a want and experience. Although we do get those clients, and they're our best clients, are the ones that need these vehicles as a necessity, whether it be for a wedding, it be a celebrity coming into town, whether it be for some sort of event. But that's what I've seen it transition more so for us, is just kind of presenting it almost as a lifestyle kind of accessory that we offer to people, rather than just being, as I thought of it initially, to be just a rental car company. People would come in and just rent the cars and take it for a day or however it worked. Really, it's kind of transitioned itself into being kind of more of that kind of business for us. But I mean, although I didn't foresee that being what it would be, it only made sense as you reach out to certain kinds of people, clienteles, and incomes. They want to use these things as a bit of their own personal branding. And so it becomes a necessity to that group of people.
So tell me a little bit about the lead generation standpoint, because I looked at your site. I took a look at kind of your inventory. It has some of the same stuff most people have, like the 458, the Gallardos, etc. But tell me a
Mhm.
little bit about how do you generate a client today? Are you leveraging lead magnets? Is there anything specific you do that is an advantage from a competitive standpoint that allows you to get more clients?
Right. Um, so we do a lot of different marketing. So we do everything from online marketing to we get involved in the community. So we're located here in the Woodlands, which is about 30 minutes outside of Houston.
Mhm.
And so it's a very tight knit community. So we're deeply involved with the local chambers, different events. We have partnerships with hotels, concierge guys. So anytime guests come into town, we usually have cars parked outside of the hotels. And one little neat trick we do is on the front windshield of each car, we have a little barcode, little scanner, and on that little sticker it says "Want to drive me." And so anyone that kind of walked into the hotel will come, they'll see a Lamborghini sitting there or Aston Martin, whatever. They'll walk up and instinctively look around, look at it, and they'll just scan that front windshield, takes them right to the reservation page. So that's the way we've
Interesting.
also marketed.
Interesting. So it's like almost like a barcode when you go to the dealership, except that it just allows people to kind of know that it's a rental.
Exactly, right. Because
Ha-
some of the agreements that we have with some of these partners, these hotels, you can't have huge branding of your business on the front of your vehicle due to their own policies. So that was just one little way we got around that.
well, has that hindered though the someone's opportunity to rent a car? Because I would think that if a lot of people want to rent, they obviously don't want other people to know they're renting the cars, unless I'm misunderstanding kind of what you're going after client wise. But wouldn't that prevent someone? It's like saying like or having a rental car
Yeah,
frame around
hey,
the.
I'm in a rental
Yeah,
car.
exactly. Like it's
Yeah,
counterproductive in a sense to some buyers. I know some people just want to experience the car. They don't think they can ever afford it. They'll do it for the day. But there is also that clientele that has their own exotic. Obviously, is coming into town and they don't have access to an exotic at that moment, so they're renting from you. So how does that, or how has that kind of helped or backfired from a marketing standpoint?
well, it isn't a problem at all. It literally will stay in front of the hotel whenever they rent the car. The sticker peels off the windshield, and
Oh,
that's
okay.
it.
So it's a quick. I
Yes,
understand. So it's not a permanent sticker that goes to the front of the car at any given time.
right, right,
Okay. Very,
right.
very interesting. And so, what has been the hardest part of starting an exotic car rental company? What has been
Again,
the biggest headache? Because it seems like insurance isn't that big of a headache for you than it is for some of the other people.
yeah. Fortunately, insurance hasn't been a big headache. Um, Always, I would say marketing. Even still, you can be as creative as you can be, but you still have to have. You can have the best products, the best vehicles, the best website, the best social media presence, but if you don't have the strategy and the money to back your marketing, then it doesn't really matter because no one's really seeing your product. So we're constantly having to put more into and be more creative about our marketing. Google AdWords, um, having the presence on Instagram and Facebook and all those different things. It's always a challenge because here in Houston we actually have a few decent competitors, and they're going to spend their money to kind of funnel you out. So although the cars are great marketing tools in themselves, someone sees you pull up to the gas station and whatever car, and then they see a rent me sticker on it, then instinctively that's great marketing because people are going to come to you to want to know how do you have this car right
Mm-hmm.
now. But I would say still is just getting the marketing side the way we want it, and also kind of profiling your customer. You kind of have to do that even more so than you would in any other business because you're handing over, the keys to a $200,000 and $300,000 vehicle to someone, and you want to make sure that they are, of course, going to be a responsible renter of your property. So
So how do you do that? Like walk. I mean, we have a lot of members here at Secret who want to start the exotic car rental. It seems that for the longest time for them, insurance is the biggest blockage. Of the expense that seems to be like dooming over most people. But tell me a little bit about this whole qualifying someone. what are some of the flags you're looking for? What are some of the ways you determine if someone is, mentally and physically fit to take that responsibility?
Right. Well, first, there's just your straightforward guidelines, right? They need to be 25. They need to have full coverage insurance. Insurance has to cover these certain key spots. They also need to provide a security deposit. So if somebody already off the top has an issue with some of those things, then they're starting to kind of narrow themselves out as to whether or not they're going to be your ideal customer, right? And then I hate to say it, but it is kind of what it is. Even if you were to go to an interview, it's about the way you kind of present yourself too, right? You will get a certain kind of feeling about an individual and how they carry themselves, how they're speaking. Are they smoking something illegal at the time that they're asking you about taking your vehicle? Are they intoxicated while they're talking to you? Are they, there's all different things you're going to take into consideration before you look at just accepting their money and moving on to the next, sale.
Can you share perhaps any stories in terms of what were some hidden things that you were able to discover that prevented you from renting to someone that could have been a danger? I'm just curious as to what are some of the things that you see from an industry standpoint in terms of people trying to pull to get into a car, even though perhaps they shouldn't.
Right. Let's see. We've had about a couple people that had mismatching IDs versus their driver's license and then the insurance. So we've had people that have tried that. I had one that was a nightmare. It was a guy that rented the 458, and he looked on paper to be, and it was kind of one of the perfect storms. Everything went wrong with that. Our software messed up. We messed up. We didn't get paid. We gave keys to someone. And then it was a horrible feeling from the second we handed the keys to the guy. But on paper, he checked out completely. So
Tell me about that story though. That sounds interesting. Why was it a nightmare? What happened? Did he crash the car?
Okay, so the way it worked was we had, and rarely do we have this happen, where someone just books the car immediately from the website without making a phone call, without doing anything. So we had a guy that went online, booked the Ferrari immediately, paid as far as we thought. In the system, it showed reserved for today. And so we had maybe, which is another thing we usually rarely do, is do an immediate rental. So it usually takes time to really do a thorough kind of check everything out. This guy was having a big birthday party, he claimed, and he needed the car quickly. So after his payment posted, as we thought, he then called and said, "Hey, I want to come pick up the car." And so I was like, we're kind of stressed here because this guy really wants to get this vehicle, but we need to really look over things. So we tried our best to look over things quickly. So he comes in. We kind of checked his ID and checked his name. Everything matched. His insurance looked like it was okay. Even just kind of quickly Googling him, we saw he lived, he was kind of our ideal customer. He was about 40 years old, seemed like he was a professional guy, all that stuff. So when we finally see him and he shows up to the office, he's a real this scraggly looking kind of guy. He had two shady guys with him, just really unkept. Like you would think he might have been homeless almost, not to prejudge him, but he just looked very sketchy. And maybe he was on something at the time and he didn't look like. So I thought to myself, well, he's already paid. He's here. He's provided us what we asked for, so it seems. And so he started just kind of giving some triggers that maybe this guy's not to be trusted. He began talking really fast, kind of, just making us feel a little uncomfortable. But we went ahead and still went through with it, gave him the keys to the car. So give him the keys. Immediately we hear him down the road, just flooring it in the car. And I was like, we made a mistake. So we get back to the office and they immediately start Googling this guy. We Google him, we find out he's a con artist, and he was on trial. He was facing 10 years in prison for impersonating a SWAT team member, and he apparently had money to just do stuff and have fun. He bought I think it was a Crown Vic, and tricked it out like it was a police car, and said he had a canine unit, had an untrained German Shepherd he was taking around, telling people he needed to go into their house with a SWAT team member. He even conned his way into some actual SWAT team runs and stuff. So some raids and whatnot. So of course I'm super nervous now because this guy has these keys, and so I was like, look, we just needed to really just not make him aware that we know all the stuff about him, but get the car back here in one piece. And not only that, but his credit card did not go through. So we just made all kinds of mistakes, learned a lot. So fortunately, he came back the following day, brought the car back, and we said, hey, your credit card didn't post. This didn't work. This didn't work. He gave us a run around on fighting cancer, all kinds of stuff. But long story short, we ended up having to send a certified letter to his home, let him know we contacted our authorities here, and it'd be a non-payment, he doesn't pay. And then, sure enough, he showed up the following day with a check. So it was, we got by on that deal, but we will not make that mistake again. Like since then, we terminated our contract with the software company we used, and we made a lot of revisions to our policies just off of that one mistake. So
that's interesting. So is that something? How often does that happen? Because you said you turned down so many people, from people that just want to, I guess, be joyriders or whatever else it is. Is that something that you see often? Like just what I call the cartoon character trying to rent a car?
Exactly, cartoon character. It's not something that I gotta say. It's not something we see too often. It's just there's these guys, you see them, they give you all the red flags immediately. It's just whether or not you're going to choose to ignore them, and that really is what helped us kind of separate ourselves from our competitors. And they end up having a lot of issues with insurance and non-payments, and the quality of the car isn't right. There's smoke in the car. There's because you didn't really qualify to the best of your ability, the person. You were just maybe thinking about getting paid, getting that sale. And so for me, I've learned it's much cheaper to just not get the sale than to be stressed out worrying about something, and then a vehicle come back damaged, or you're having to come out of pocket for something.
And when you started, did you start with like one or two exotics, or did you get some funding to buy multiple cars?
Started one at a time. Almost one at a time. Started out with the Audi R8 and the Aston Martin and a Porsche, and then just kind of maneuvered our way up and up and up towards where we wanted to be. There's still some vehicles we'd love to get our hands on, but yeah, for me, it being kind of a one-man show, I don't have a bunch of funding out there. I don't have any real partners or people that are investing their large sums of money to make this grow. It's something that I had to really live below my means for a pretty substantial amount of time, so that I had the cash on me to go to banks and to be able to go purchase things in cash. And being of an IT background, I was able to offshoot some of those costs of building websites and SEO things and like that. So yeah, that's kind of how I was able to so far set up the company the way it is right now.
What car was most popular when starting up? Like, was there a car that you just felt good with because it kept renting out perfectly every time?
Yeah, probably the Aston Martin DB9. On my side of town, especially, it just seemed to work. And that was actually one of the first vehicles too, and it also worked really well for weddings. So people would love to just have them used for photo shoots, for their engagement pictures, or their exit cars for their weddings, because nobody really sees Aston Martins. So.
All right, they could perceived to be rarer and harder to get, even though they are still technically cheaper by all means.
Exactly, yeah. So
people don't know it's the same price as a Honda Accord. I swear the amount of lack of knowledge in this industry is like mind-boggling,
But even you had the same. Yours was a DBS, same color as the one that I currently have, the DB9, that
Oh, the
red.
red one, right? The infrared one.
The
Yeah,
red kind of wine color.
yeah, yeah. There's a few different reds. There's torch red. There's infrared. And the actual infrared on the DBS is a specific DBS color, but I know exactly what you're talking about with the darker burgundy-ish red.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about if you were to do this all over again today, knowing what you know now in the car industry, knowing the competitors you have, and knowing the cost of marketing a car. What is the specific secret sauce to being effective in this industry?
The secret sauce is just quality and transparency. In this business, there's a lot. Anyone can post a picture of a car
Mm-hmm.
and can say, you know, I rent Ferraris, and I can go get a stock photo of Ferrari, make a website, and say this is what I do.
Mm-hmm.
But not many can have the transparency to actually show you all of their cars and to show you the quality of the vehicles,
Mm-hmm.
And can guarantee, hey, this is what you see is what you're going to get
Mm-hmm.
with us. Many times, you'll just find a lot of shadiness in this industry.
Can you
Because
define what that means for people listening who may not know? Like, what do you mean by shadiness? Because I want them to understand, like, what
right,
specifically you refer to from a business standpoint, not from your customer standpoint.
right. In terms of shady, you've got some guys that might have a dealership, let's say, and they might have cars on consignment from customers, and they might be renting a customer's consignment car out because someone, they know, man, someone probably love to take this Gallardo out for the weekend. I'm supposed to be selling this guy's car, but why not go ahead and rent it out? It's just sitting here on my floor plan. Why not just go ahead and send it out? And when you do shady business like that, there's plenty of horror stories. Anybody that's had a horrible car renting experience understands, and they'll be willing to come spend maybe a little more money with a company that they can see and know has a reputation of doing kind of the right things. I've heard stories of guys taking cars, going out to dinner, and then the owner of the car that they thought was being sold at a dealership was at the restaurant at valet. Like, why is my car here? So how embarrassing is that? Cars getting repoed while they're on rental. Um, Cars smelling like smoke. I mean, there is a such thing as a Ferrari that's not worth a Honda Civic. Like, it just exists. So, and they'll still kind of offer these things at a premium price to people that are kind of unknown because they've never experienced a Ferrari. So, cars that don't drive right, they don't sound right, interior's a mess, just bad business overall. And as if anyone that's watching is wanting to get into this business, the one thing you have to really protect, as in any business, is just your reputation and kind of your transparency. So we try to be super transparent. We try to have a really strong presence as far as see events we're at, being endorsed by the people that we've been endorsed by. All speaks to the fact that we will treat whoever comes in as a top priority, no matter in terms of quality and service, and then just the quality of the product is super important.
Why do you think so many people fail to survive in this industry? Like, because I mean, even you have people like my friend John Tamarian over at Lulavi, who's shifting his entire business model from rentals to We Are Curated, where he's restoring exotics instead of actually renting them out. Like he still has his rental, but it's not as much dominant anymore in his business space. Why do you think, from your perspective, having been in the industry, why do you think that that's kind of a trend that most people end up going out of business when they start in this industry?
It's a very expensive business to be in. One, just take the car out of it. Just take the acquisition of the vehicle out of it. Just the maintenance of it. Just the business side of having to figure out logistically. It takes time to get a car somewhere if someone wants a vehicle delivered. There's a lot of scheduling that has to happen. There's a lot of checking and inspecting that has to go on prior to renting the vehicle and after getting the vehicle. It takes a lot out of someone, especially if they don't understand how to even, let's say, handle the different softwares you need. You need to have GPS tracking. You need to have mile per hour tracking. You need to do all these things to protect yourself and to kind of solidify the quality of service you're going to provide. If you take the shortcuts, you're really going to have a short career in this business. But even for the ones like you had mentioned, one of your buddies that's actually been very successful in Miami, it's just a hard business overall to be in because anyone can say I have a vehicle and you can drive it.
So when does it become worth it? Because if you think about renting a car for one day, right, for like $500 or $1,000, well, that's not worth all that shipping fee and all the crap that you have to put for like $800. How
Yeah.
many days does a car have to be rented out in order for it to kind of be worth it ultimately? In a month, like in a 30-day period. When are you satisfied? Where you're like, you know what, this was a good month for that car.
Right. Well, it depends on the vehicle, of course, depending on how much. It also depends on the model, how we have it set. Is this a car that we have bought and paid cash on? Is this a car that we have still open as far as finance? And so when you look at one car, let's take the one that you're financing out. Let's say your car payment is $1,200 on that car. So what you want is for that car to at least do, at a minimum, you want it to do hopefully $1,500 a month, so it pays for itself in a little bit, of your time and energy. So, kind of traditionally, what you want to do is have your prices set that once it rents out twice, that it pays for itself, hopefully. So every car at a minimum, we want it to rent out for at least 5 times, 6 times in a month. That doesn't always happen, but you have enough profit cushion in there to where you say, okay, we're at least in the black this month, or we went well above what we wanted to do this month for this certain vehicle. And that also gives you a gauge onto what vehicles are working and what vehicles aren't working, and what kind of tweaks you need to make. You had mentioned earlier what causes many to fail in this business. You will always get approached by guys that have nice cars that want you to take their car, and so you have to try your best to steer away from that, because early on we had done that, and it's not the same as a person that's coming into this strictly understanding this is an entrepreneurial effort, and the car is just a product. It's not something that is an extension of me as a person, and there's no sentimental value tied up in it. So even though there's a temptation for someone that has, let's say, I don't know, a 488, and they go, I bet you could get $3,000 a day for this car, rent it out from me. But you take their car and they're just completely worried the whole time. How much am I getting here? How much am I getting there? How many miles do they put on it? I think I might need the car back, or we can't do it today. How about? And it just becomes a real stressful situation for everybody involved. So I recommend anybody that wants to try to get into this is to just start where you can feasibly by yourself and just try to grow the business from there.
And was there, before I let you go, was there a worse car that you recommend no one ever buys and rents because it just didn't work?
Cars that don't work. Probably for whatever reason, the Porsche Carrera S is probably one of the least that we've done out of. I'm not sure. I guess because people don't view it as a super exotic car because they see Porsches. But that one just didn't do too well. Infamously, what I've heard, which I've never owned one, is a Mercedes SLS. I've heard bad things about that just because people view it as a Mercedes. They don't understand that
it doesn't have a badge on it, so they don't understand the badgeless approach.
Exactly. They don't understand it's an amazing.
Right. They'd rather drive a 2004 Gallardo that's like 60 grand than a 300K SLS.
Exactly. See, only a car guy really understands that, which is great when we have real car guys that come to see, the cars or to come to our events, because they know, what they're talking about, and they appreciate cars. So.
That's funny though. So I want to thank you for being on with me, Chris. Can you leave us with any final piece of advice for people that in general want to be in business, especially if people want to transition from their 9 to 5 to entrepreneurship? Is there a final lesson you learned? And then please follow up with any type of a place you think people can go to find more information about you and your rental company?
Okay. Um, sure. I would say, firstly, um, you can't be focused solely on the fact that you want to get into business and be an entrepreneur, because that's what successful people do, and you're going to be rich and powerful, and people are going to admire you because you have on the nice watch and the nice house and drive a nice car. That can't be your only motivation for wanting to not only start this kind of business, because this business is one of those that I kind of say is a very front-facing business. It's not like we um, sell rubber duckies, and you have to kind of really push that to somebody. When we pull up an exotic vehicle, people, as you know, they'll look at you a certain kind of way, and they'll already inquire on who you are, what you do, how did you get to where you are in life. But it can't be about that. It has to be more about learning your craft, whatever it is you're wanting to be involved in, to the best of your ability and better than your competitors. And if you do that, surround yourself with the right team of people, and remove, equally as important, removing the negative people from your circle, then you're going to just naturally, the end result is going to be the money and the whatever that comes along with quote unquote success. But it can't be about strictly about making that dollar, because you'll be quickly out of business. You'll get tempted by the wrong person and in business, and you'll end up sacrificing yourself and your business. So I strongly recommend that, and also just being able to live um, below your means to accomplish your goal, to get to where you're trying to get to. You don't have to make six figures to own an exotic vehicle. You just don't. If you know
That's a very true fact.
yeah, if you know how to shop, and if you understand cars and you understand techniques of how to buy cars. When I was little, literally when I was 15, I used to go to car dealerships, and I would talk my way into cars to test drive them. And so I started out going to Honda. It was the Honda S2000, $35,000. And of course, I was maybe 16 at the time. Was still in school. 35,000 looks like 350,000 to me, But I would come in there, and just off of just being able to communicate and look people in the eye, and to kind of have a knowledge of what I'm talking about, speaking proper English, it got me into those cars. And by the time I was in my senior year, I worked my way up to the Ferrari dealership, where I would front my way. And my friends thought I was just crazy, psychotic, because I'd bring them along with me. And so they'd be like, we should not be here. Like if we could convince him that we are a potential buyer, then we're going to be great one day in business. That we're going to cultivate those qualities that we need to sell ourselves and be in business. And so, like I said, that's also a big key, is knowing how to carry yourself and present yourself the correct way to your potential clients and customers.
And where can people go to get more information about you or the rental company we were talking about today?
They can always go to the website, carbonautogroup.com. We're also, of course, on all your social media, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Carbon Auto Group, as well as my personal Instagram page is Carbon LLC _Chris.
Okay. Very, very cool. So that way we'll make sure people reach out to you, as I'm sure they'll have tons of questions. So you'll get flooded with people asking, how do you do this? How do you do that? I want to thank you for sharing your experience with us today. And best of luck to you, my friend, in years to come. I'm sure you're going to do great.
Thank you so much.